All right. It's great serving with Pastor Mario. He does a great job with worship and youth in Peru. Well, I want to welcome you again at Crossbridge Community Church. If you don't know me, I am Pastor Isaac, our Peru campus pastor. And, if you know anybody in the La Salle, Peru area, right, you know where to send them next week for Show Up Sunday, right, our Peru campus. So if you're out that way or you know somebody who's out that way, make sure you invite them to the Peru campus. So I'm excited. If you can't tell by my face, I'm super excited. I'm excited to be here with you, but I'm also excited because we're right on the cusp of fall. And I absolutely love fall. Fall is one of my favorite seasons, the nice, crisp fall air. There's nothing like fall when you take in that deep breath of fall. I absolutely love that. The colors changing, that's awesome. I love that about fall, except in my front yard, there's two big dead trees. So there's no colors changing there. But in my neighborhood, I enjoy the colors changing. Pumpkin spice latte. Let's hear it for pumpkin spice latte, right? I don't like coffee, so that's not me, but I hear a lot of people like that. And football. I love football. Football season has started, which for Bears fans I know is really depressing, but that's cool. I'm a Lions fan, so that's even more depressing. So, but it's great. I'm excited to be here. We're continuing in our series, like Mario said, all out, going outside of the walls of the church and outside of ourselves for the Jesus mission, to reach people and lead them into a growing relationship with Him. And you see, when people get into a growing relationship with Jesus, it begins to change them, helps them be more patient, more kind, more loving, more forgiving, and then our world begins to change. And that is an exciting and awesome and critical mission. Our passage for this series that we've been in all out is Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 through 20. It's what's been termed the Great Commission. So, when the Bible was written in Greek in the New Testament, they didn't have titles, but over the ages, the church termed this passage the Great Commission. And it says this, it's on the screens if you want to follow along. It says, Jesus came and told His disciples, I've been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go, right? Go all out and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the very end of the age. You see, we are excited about that mission, the Jesus mission. We're excited about it at Crossbridge. That's why next week we're doing Show Up Sunday. So you can go out and invite your friends, your family members, your neighbors to show up and begin a relationship with Jesus Christ. It's our job as Jesus followers to go. But, and there's always a but, right? There's a but here, right? What do we do when people actually show up here? What do we do? So let's say, for instance, you invite your family member or a friend or a neighbor to church, and the craziest thing happens. They actually show up, right? What do we do when they show up? Well, our passage tells us what we ought to do. Jesus says, teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. Jesus tells us to teach people His commands. It's an important part of the Great Commission. But what do we typically do when we bring people to church? At least what I do. I don't know what anybody else does. When I bring people to church, I bring them to church and I'm like, all right, Pastor Kevin, teach them all the commands of Jesus. I got them here. Let me get my finder's fee. I got them to church and Pastor Kevin's going to teach them all the commands of Jesus. When the truth is, it's not Pastor Kevin's job to teach people all the commands of Jesus. It's Pastor John's job to teach them because he's a spiritual growth pastor. You see, the truth is, it's not just a pastor's responsibility to help people grow closer to God. It's all of our responsibilities as Jesus followers, as Christians. In fact, one biblical scholar says it this way. It says, having become a disciple, a Jesus follower, a Christian, everyone, not some, not a few, but everyone in turn is to obey the teaching command that Jesus gave us on this occasion. So if we're going to teach people the commands of Jesus, we probably need to know the commands of Jesus, right? We probably need to know those. It seems pretty simple, right? We just remember the information. We remember the commands of Jesus, and then we can just teach people the commands of Jesus. But did you know that Jesus commanded about 50 different things in the New Testament? If you read through the New Testament, you hear what Jesus talks about. He has about 50 different commands. So for the rest of this message, we're going to just read through all 50 of those commands, and we're going to memorize them and analyze them. It should take somewhere between 1 and 3 hours, so just buckle up. Please don't leave. I'm joking. It's people heading for the exits. right? But there's some pretty big commands of Jesus, right? There's some big commands that we probably should know, commands of Jesus. I'll just read a few for us. Jesus says, "You have heard that our ancestors were told, 'You must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment.' But I say, if you're even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot," this is Jesus' words, not mine. "If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court." And then he said, "You have heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at someone with lust has already committed adultery with them in their heart." Jesus says, "I say, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." He also says, "Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them. Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you." The golden rule, right? How many know the golden rule? We've heard that before. One of the commands of Jesus. You see, that's a lot of stuff. Even just those 5 things that I read, like that's a lot of stuff, truthfully, to remember. It's a lot of information. It seems like there's a lot of rules and commandments that Jesus has. You know, a few weeks ago, maybe about a month now, my wife and I went on vacation to California. It was a great vacation. We have 2 little kids, and my parents took our kids for 2 weeks, and it was just my wife and I, and we got to go to California. It was a great, great trip. It was one of the best trips I've ever taken. And so I watched this documentary before we went to California. I thought it'd be a great idea to watch this documentary and get some ideas of what to do in California. And one of the things it said to do was go to this place called Pismo Beach State Dunes. And what's special about this place is you can drive cars, you can have 4-wheelers all on the beach. Like they have these big sand dunes. And I thought this is going to be a great idea. Turned out it wasn't a great idea. Being on the beach and my wife, never riding a 4-wheeler just didn't go too well. But we ended up going there, and we rented these 4-wheelers. And so what happens is you get to the office before you get on the beach, and you sign the paperwork, you pile in this SUV, and they drive you down to the beach. And once you get down there by the 4-wheelers, you get out with the groups. And so my wife and I are standing there with some other groups, and they begin to tell you all the rules that you have to follow when riding these 4-wheelers. And so they begin to go through the list of rules and say, hey, you can only go here, you can't go here, you got to stay so many feet away from the beach. And they begin to tell you, this is what you do when you stall out, and they walk you through that, and this is what you do if you get stuck, and they walk you through that, and they tell you how to start up the 4-wheeler. And so they tell you like 50 different things, and then after, they do that in like 2 minutes, they throw you the keys, and they're like, all right, have fun. And my wife and I just kind of looked at each other and were like, okay. My wife has never ridden a 4-wheeler. I've ridden one like twice. And so I kid you not, as soon as I got onto the 4-wheeler, I forgot how to start it up. Like they just told me, but I had forgot how to start it up. And so the guy looks at me because I'm just kind of sitting there, and he's like, do you need me to help you? I was like, no. I mean, I got it. But if you wanted to show me, I mean, you could. But, I think I got it. So he comes over and he shows me how to start it up. And sure enough, we go out, and one of us stalls out. My wife stalls out, and so I had to call them. I had to look up the number and call them, and they tell me how to, restart the 4-wheeler. And I won't say who, but one of us got our 4-wheeler stuck deep in the sand, really deep in the sand. And so I had to call again, and they're probably thinking, this guy, it should never let him go out on the 4-wheeler. But I called them, they helped me get it unstuck, and there were just so many rules that they had. There were literally too many instructions for us to remember and internalize. And in some ways, being a Jesus follower feels like that. We show up to church, and there's rules to follow. We know if we're a Christian, there's things we should do, and there's things we shouldn't do, and there's all sorts of rules and commandments. And we're supposed to know those commands, and not only that, Jesus tells us we should teach other people the commands to follow after him. So it seems like a problem, right? All these commands, and we're supposed to teach it to other people as well. The good thing is, Jesus simplifies it for us. He gave us a summary, a sort of cheat sheet to following him. Not long before Jesus gave the Great Commission, he was asked by someone who knew all the laws and commands inside and out. In fact, Matthew, the gospel writer, calls him an expert in the law. So this guy knows everything he's supposed to know to follow God. And he probably has taught other people as well. This expert in law knows probably all the Levitical law, the 10 Commandments, knows them inside and out. Yet the gospel writer tells us that he still asked Jesus this question. He said, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Which one is the greatest?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and all the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. You see, the Great Commission is born out of the Great Commandment to love God and to love others. It's love that sparks our obedience and leads people into a growing relationship with Jesus. You know, my wife and I both have like lists that you know, not actual lists. You know, we don't have like a 10 commandments for each other, but like we have like mental lists that we have for one another that we like each other to do for one another. And the truth is, you know, our love isn't based off of us like fulfilling those things that we want to do, that we want each other to do. In fact, there's a lot of times there's things that are on the list that we don't enjoy doing. Like one of the things on my list is my wife enjoys it when I do the dishes, and I hate doing the dishes. Like someone should invent like a dishwasher or something, because I absolutely hate doing the dishes. I hate doing it. But the thing is, like, doing the things that my wife wants me to do doesn't produce love. It's, in fact, love that we share with one another that helps us to fulfill the things that we have for one another. You see, we teach people the commands of Jesus by the way in which we love God and love those around us. It's all about relationship. You see, we teach the commands of Jesus to other people by the way in which we live our lives. Our lives matter as Jesus followers. Jim Henson, the guy who created the Muppets, he says it this way. He said, people don't remember what you try to teach them. They remember what you are. You see, they don't remember the things you try to teach them. If you were to try to walk people through the commands of Jesus and what you should do and what you shouldn't do, it doesn't stick as much as how they watch you live your life and follow the commands of Jesus. Who you are matters when it comes to leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus. Have you ever had someone tell you to do something, but they don't do it themselves? Anybody ever have that experience? Someone tells you to do something and they don't do it themselves. See, people watch what you do. Our kids, if anybody has kids, you know kids watch what you do. I have to admit I have a slight addiction to chips. Like, I just absolutely love chips. I have this weird like obsession with chips. I love chips. It's like my snack of choice. And my wife, she's a fairly healthy eater, a lot healthier than myself, and she just hates that I have chips. So anytime I go to the grocery store, my wife kind of, you know, like is just super hesitant to ever send me there. And so if I go, like, because I always come back with like 10 packs of Doritos. Usually it's 2, but I always come back with Doritos or, you know, Pringles, anything. I'll eat any chip. Like, I love chips. And my wife, you know, tries to raise our daughter well and healthy, and so, you know, we don't let her have chips before dinner. And so a lot of times what happens, especially if we're having, you know, Mexican food, it happens all the time. I'll pull out the bag of chips and I'll start snacking on them before we eat dinner. And my daughter will be like, chips, I want chips. Like, I want some chips. And I'm like eating the chips. Like, you can't have chips before, you know, until you eat your dinner, you know. And they're not healthy, you know, and I'm just scarfing down chips, right? Like, our kids watch what we do. Our classmates, if you're in high school or middle school, our classmates watch what we do. Your neighbors, like, they watch what you do and how you live your life. Your coworkers, they watch you. They see your work ethic, your attitude, your honesty. The way you teach people the commands of Jesus is the way you live. Your friends, they watch you in the way you live your life. People watch us whether we know it or not. You know, when I lived in Kentucky, I was an associate pastor, I was a volunteer pastor for a number of years at the church, and it was a small Nazarene church that we're at, and my job was to drive the van on Wednesday nights. I worked with the youth and the kids on Wednesday night, and I drove this old rickety blue van on Wednesday nights, and I picked up kids. This van was like a ticking time bomb. It was like one bad thing from blowing up, and we picked up kids and teens in it, so that's great. But I would pick up kids in our neighborhood. Our church was like right in the middle of a neighborhood, and I'd drive around and pick up kids. And a lot of times, most of the families in that neighborhood had broken homes, broken relationships. There was just a lot of strange things happening with the relationships with the parents of the kids. So we thought it was absolutely necessary to pick these kids up for church, these teens and these kids. And so one time on a Wednesday night, I got in the van and I started driving around the neighborhood. I went to one of the families of 5 kids. They had a couple of youth and kids, and one of my first stops. And I remember I pulled into the driveway, And I got out like usual, and I went to go walk up to knock on the door and let them know that I was there. And I was walking up the driveway. I remember I could hear them just screaming at each other. There's a couple, and they're just yelling at each other. You never do this, and you always do this. And they're just screaming at the top of their lungs. And it was like World War III that was happening in this living room. And as I'm walking up the driveway, I'm thinking, like, this is going to be awkward. Like knocking on this door, like this is going to be kind of awkward. But I thought, I need to pick up these kids. And so I walked up to the door, and I knocked. As soon as I knocked, you just kind of heard it go silent. And one of the couples was like, "Oh no, it's Wednesday." And they're like, "Oh, it's the pastor from the church." And so sure enough, someone comes to the door, and one of the two answers the door, and they have a big smile and says, "Pastor, how you doing? You doing all right?" I'm doing good. How are you guys doing? We're fine. Everything's good. Like, we're doing well. Kids, time for church. Pastor's here. And just acted like nothing had happened. You see, we're not fooling anyone. People can tell. Maybe not every single time, but eventually people know what you are all about. Who you really are matters when it comes to teaching people the commands of Jesus. See, people see the way in which you forgive when someone betrays you or does you wrong. They see the way you treat people and talk to other people. They see the way you spend your time and spend your money. They see the way you stick to your word when you say, "I'll help you out," or "we can hang out together," or "I'll finish that one thing." They see the way you react when you mess up or you make a mistake and how you address it. Because here's the truth. Even as Jesus followers, nobody is perfect. Nobody's perfect. Not even Jesus followers. Not me. Not anybody. We make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But it's how we respond to mistakes that teach people what a Jesus follower looks like. I have a friend of mine who recently told me a story about a situation that happened. Good friend of mine, and he leads people in his company. He's a leader in his company, and a lot of times he sends people out to jobs to do work in his company. And he told me a story. I was at his house for lunch, and he was telling me one time at work that one of his workers, he said he knows his stuff. He's a very skilled worker. But a lot of times he said this worker has a bad attitude and doesn't really live up to his potential. He doesn't work as hard as I want him to. And so as my friend was like preparing to have this guy sent out, his worker was like loading up the truck. And as this guy was loading up the truck, my friend was helping him load up the truck to get out to the job because he's trying to help him get out to the job faster. And his worker was kind of slopping things onto the truck and just throwing out. He had a bad attitude, kind of huffing and puffing. And my friend, the leader in this company, was kind of getting agitated. He wants him to get out there fast, and this guy's got a bad attitude, throwing stuff on the truck. And so his worker ended up throwing something onto the truck and busting out the back window of the truck, one of his trucks, my friend's truck. And so my friend said he just lost it, absolutely lost it. Started using some choice words, ended up kicking a door, and just absolutely lost it in front of one of his workers. Now, my friend, I look up to my friend. I consider him a Jesus follower, high integrity. I would never in my life guess that this happened. In fact, when he was telling me this story, I said, "There's no way that happened. There's no way." And he said, "Yeah, it did. It did happen." And he face kind of went red and said, "You know what? And I feel absolutely sick about it." And he goes, "I need to apologize for what I did." Later that week, I ended up picking him up. We were going to an event, and I picked him up, and as we're driving the car, I said, "Hey, how did it go? Did you talk to your worker?" He said, "You know what? I did. I apologized to him, and I told him, listen, I should have never acted like that." And I still told him the truth, that, hey, you're not reaching your potential, and I would love it if you had a better attitude, but I told him, I'm so sorry for the way I acted. I never, ever should have acted like that. And, I don't know if, that guy will show up to church, or there's no, miraculous story where, he fell down and said, hey, I'm going to become a Christian. But I'll tell you what, he's one step closer than he was before, because he saw a Jesus follower model forgiveness and reconciliation. He saw it right in front of him, how someone models saying, you know what, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. You see, we teach people the commands of Jesus with the way we live. So when we do make an invite to something like Show Up Sunday, people know that Jesus actually does make a difference in your life. You actually are a forgiving, reconciling person. It does make a difference the way we live our lives. We not only teach people what it means to follow Jesus with the way we live, but the way we interact with one another as well. When people take notice of the way we live, we can start to innovate in our relationships, start to change different things in our relationships by asking the right questions. The questions we ask one another matters. You see, having a genuine concern for others is more than just asking about the weather and sports. See, if we want to lead our friends, our family, our neighbors into a growing relationship with Jesus, we have to ask the right questions. Questions like, hey, how is life going? How is life going right now? How's your marriage going? How are things going in your marriage? How are your kids? Tell me about your kids. Questions like, what do you wish would be different in your life right now? Or how are you winning? What's going well in your life right now? And honestly, it may seem a little bit awkward to ask those questions, right? Like for me, it's sometimes kind of awkward to ask my neighbor that I know pretty well, like, hey, how are things? How's your marriage going? It feels awkward. But here's the thing, I'm not asking you to ask some guy in line at the grocery store, what do you wish you could change in your life right now? And they're like, dude, what are you talking about? I'm not asking you to ask those type of questions to people at the grocery store. But I'm talking about family members and friends, coworkers and neighbors that you know well. You see, how much would you have to dislike someone to not take the time to see how their life is really going? Not only do you have to ask the right questions, but you should share the right things as well. You see, sharing parts of our stories leads people into a growing relationship with Jesus. We talked about that a little bit last week. Pastor Kevin talked about sharing our stories. And see, we can share part of our stories, part of our lives with other people. You see, are you open and honest with others that you care about? Because here's the thing, if you're not capable of talking to your brother or your sister about your mistakes, you can be sure that you can't talk about them with God either. And therefore, you end up confessing into the mirror and to yourself. You see, when we are honest with people close to us, it models for them what a Jesus follower looks like. And a few years ago, I was riding in a car with a pastor friend of mine. He's much older, but he's a mentor of mine. I interned for him at his church when I was in college, and he's a great friend and great mentor. And I remember one time, and I don't even remember the circumstances, I was visiting him a few years ago, and we were in the car together. And we were driving somewhere, and I remember we're just kind of small talking, like friends do. And he asked me, he's like, hey, how are things going in your life? And I gave him the answer we always give everyone, right? Good, like everything is good, things are going well. I can't think of anything that's not going well, and life is good, and marriage is good, and all that. And so, and I say, hey, how things going with you? He said, yeah, things are going all right. I would say there's some good things and there's some bad things. And he said, I've been praying for my daughter. She's far from God. She's making some terrible choices in life, and it just eats at me, And I've been praying for her, and I love her so much. And then he said, things at my church. Man, I just keep praying for a breakthrough and for things to happen. It's just been frustrating. I've been frustrated. He said, but there's been some good things that's been happening. He shared some good things with me. But in that moment, as he shared that with me, I just kind of had this, and it wasn't a weird way. Like, he didn't share in some weird, awkward way. It was just like a casual conversation that he was having with me. And in that moment, I just felt this overwhelming sense of peace and even hope in that moment, just because he was so honest and open with me. And really, what he was doing in that moment is he was teaching me. He was sharing with me what it means to be a Jesus follower. And he wasn't like, hey, Isaac, take out a pad, a pen and paper. I'm going to teach you what it looks like to be a Jesus follower, so take notes. He was just living his life out loud right there in that car, and he was just showing me what it meant to be a Jesus follower by living open and honestly with me. And he was teaching me and really telling me, hey, it's okay just to be open and honest with friends and with family, because you help to show them what it means to be a Jesus follower. I think a lot of times Christians, we get this bad rap. Hey, they're fake. They act like everything is good when really we know it's not. You see, when you live honestly with others, you're teaching them how to obey the commands of Jesus. You're leading them into a growing relationship with him. See, Jesus has given us a mission. We're called to reach people and teach them the commands of Jesus, the command to love God and to love others. We teach people not with our words or with rules, but with the way in which we live. Your life is a witness to Jesus. Do you want people to show up in this place? Then we need to live it out. Will you pray with me? with your heads bowed and your eyes closed, I just want to ask two questions. The first is this: maybe you haven't been living for Jesus, or you have never started. You say, you know what, like I don't even know what it looks like to be a Jesus follower, and I want to start living for Him. I want to start living out my life in a way that represents Him. And you say, I haven't started doing that in my life, and I want to do that. Just put your hand in the air and say, I want to start following after Jesus and living out loud for Him. I want to do that. See your hand. The second thing I want to ask with your, see that hand. Second thing I want to ask with your head bowed and your eyes closed is this. Maybe you say, I am a Jesus follower. I'm a Christian. But there's been some things in my life where I haven't lived as a Jesus follower. I haven't modeled forgiveness. I haven't been a good, honest coworker. I haven't modeled what it looks like to be a Jesus follower to my kids. And I want to start doing that right now. Would you put your hand in the air and say, that's me. I need to start changing some things so I can be a person who lives out loud. I see your hands. I see your hands. God, I'm so thankful for the way you speak to us. And I ask you to help me to live out loud to my wife, to my kids, to my neighbors, to the people in my town. So that, God, when I say something like, hey, you should come to church with me this weekend, God, that they would know it's real because it's made a difference in my life. Help us, Lord, to teach people your commands by the way in which we live. I pray this all in your name. Amen.